Okay, so let's start with chapter number 4. The topic is psychological disorders. In this chapter, we're going to study about the concept of abnormality and psychological disorders, the classification of psychological disorders, the factors underlying the abnormal behavior, what are the factors responsible, and then the major part will be covering of major psychological disorders. So various disorders are there. So let us just complete with the very first topic. What is the concept of abnormality and psychological disorder? See, basically the abnormality word means, if I just talk about literally what does it mean? Away from the normal. What does abnormal means? We use this word very often. Yes. So literally what does this word means? Away from the normal. But this definition also have certain common features. Abnormality one is what does deviant means? Any behavior which is different, which is about mood. So it may be related to very hyper activity or hyper emotions. The person could be very much aggressive, or the person at the other extreme could be very much low, very silent, very quiet. So this include the unusual behavior, and even bizarre means very weird, kind of very confusing, very conflicting. So these are the characteristics of deviant. The second D stands for distressing. This word I hope is clear with all of you, as we have done this, which is very unpleasant, very. The third one is dysfunctional. For the word is functional, and what is dysfunctional? When the functions start interfering daily activities in a constant. Or what about the special children? These children are having dysfunctions. Why? Because these people are not able to carry out their daily activity. Whenever we see or say some behavior is danger or dangerous, that means that it is causing some kind of harm to someone. Yes, when behavior is causing, maybe that harm could be mental, maybe that harm could be physical, but yes, this behavior is dangerous for our mental and physical health. So these are the 4 Ds. Hope you all clear with it. Now come upon the next thing. Various approaches are there, which is, differentiating or distinguishing between normal and abnormal behavior. So from these approaches, there emerge 2 basic and conflicting views. See, various approaches have been given by various psychologists. Now, out of these approaches, 2 basic and conflicting views emerged. Now, what are they? The first approach views abnormal behavior as a deviation from social norms. What does this mean? See, if I say deviation from social norms, you all are clear what are social norms. In our society we are living, we are following certain norms, certain rules and regulations. And if an individual is deviating, or if an individual is not following that, different values which are, always appreciated, whether it is related to cooperation or your family values, to be helpful, to be not to argue with the elders. So these are certain behavior values which are always appreciated in Indian culture. But when we talk about the Western culture, these things are not developed, or these things are not enhanced or appreciated by the society. In Western culture, what all things are always encouraged, to be aggressive, to fight for the things, to answer back, independent, and to see yourself first. Our Indian and Western perspective that if a person is deviating from social norms, he or she will be considered abnormal. Now come upon the second approach. Now what it is saying, the second approach views fulfillment, well-being, self-fullest. So here Maslow's need hierarchy also works. So this approach is saying that abnormal behavior is having any purpose in your life, if you're not fighting for your growth and fulfillment, if you're not realizing your potential, that means you are doing some abnormal activity. So according to this criteria, conforming behavior can be seen as abnormal if it is maladaptive. You are getting the thing. Why this approach is just opposite the behavior will be normal. According to this view, it is saying that you have to be adapted. You have to adjust to the situation, and you should always go for positive things. That is growth, fulfillment, realizing your potential, self-actualization, right? A very good example also given to make it very simple. A student in the class prefers to remain silent, even a mind. Now, this is what maladaptation. See, if I'm teaching you and we'll have a doubt session later on. So, if I'm asking you again and again that please come up with your question, come up with your queries, and some student is having a lot of doubts inside her or his mind, but they are not asking it. So that will be considered as maladaptation, because as per normal behavior, you should always ask your question. If you are not asking, so many things must be there. Maybe you are very shy, maybe you are lacking confidence, you know, or maybe you are is considered a abnormal behavior, and second one is seeing abnormal behavior as maladaptive. If you are not able to adapt and adjust to the situations, your behavior will be abnormal. Now the word you can see on page number 71, second column, second paragraph. The stigma attached to mental illness means that people are hesitant to consult of their problems. We all understand this situation. This is prevailing in our society. We can see that if we are having any problem related to our mental aspect, we always, hesitate to talk about it with our friends, with our parents, and to go and consult a doctor and a psychologist is a very rare thing. If somebody is revealing it, we always give them a tag of For physical problem, we frequently visit the clinics and get it solved. But for these mental illnesses, we are hesitant to consult the concerned person. Fine. Now the second thing, historical background. Now we'll talk about the historical background, how this abnormal behavior was carried long back. How was it seen from different viewpoints? See, when we talk about the first one ancient theory that is still encountered today holds evil spirits. You can read this. We all know about this. Even in rural areas, in villages nowadays, this practice is even there. It even exists there now. If somebody is having any mental illness, what it is considered that it must be related to some evil spirit. Viewpoint come that individuals behave strangely because this so we have done earlier also. If our bodies and brains are not working properly, some strange behavior is obvious because our brain and bodies, as we talk about the mental processes and the brain activities in the very first chapter in 11th class, yes, all these things are interdependent, the mind and brain, same thing. So this viewpoint is, this approach is saying the biological, or this is known as the biological or organic approach. What does it saying? That there is evidence that body and brain processes have been linked to many types of maladaptive behavior. For certain types of disorders, correcting these defective biological processes results in improved functioning. It means that if a person is having certain psychological disorder, say anxiety disorder, let's take an example. So according to this approach, there must be some biological reason behind this disorder. So if we are giving the proper medicines, the proper therapies, this behavior could be treated by treating the biological cause. So it is stressing, it is emphasizing on what? The biological cause. The second one is the psychological approach, right? Now, this psychological approach consists of three perspectives. Sorry. Another approach is the psychological approach. What does it saying? That psychological problems are caused by inadequacies in the way an individual thinks, feels, or perceives the world. When we see psychological point of view, there is some abnormality in the thinking process, in the feeling aspect, if we talk about emotions, or how does a person is perceiving the world. So thinking, feeling, and perceiving, all these include the psychological approach. If there is some inadequacy, if there is some maladaptation, then the person start developing any psychological problem. According to which approach? Psychological approach, right? So these three approaches, the first one is known as supernatural approach. The second one is biological or organic, same thing. The third is psychological approach. These were the three major perspectives, you can say, the viewpoints, you can say, the approaches, you can say. Now later on, another approach came, organismic approach. Who has given? The Socrates and Plato. You must have read about these people in your political science. Yes, Hippocrates, Socrates, and Plato. These people developed the organismic approach. What does this approach is saying? It viewed disturbed behavior as arising out of conflicts between emotion and reason. What does this mean? A very simple thing, organismic approach, what it is telling you, that if a person is having any disturbed behavior or any kind of maladapted behavior, there must be some conflict between his emotions and reason. Reason means the real life, the real aspect of the life. We see the thing from our point of view, yes, and there is also a real perception of that problem. So there is a conflict between the two, that how do we see that problem and how does that problem actually exist in the scenario. So this is the conflict between emotion and reason according to organismic approach. Now another, Galen elaborated on the role of the four humors in personal character and temperament. See, it is very much related, as we have done the Charak Samhita in chapter number 2. You all remember the type approach. It is not very important from exam point of view, but as we cannot skip any of the topics, so I'm just telling you for your knowledge that it is related quite a lot. It is very much similar to that approach given by Charak Samhita, Ayurveda. So this four humors is what? Earth, air, fire and water, which combine to form four essential body fluids: blood, black bile, yellow bile and phlegm. This is not at all important, just read it for your knowledge, but this is important, yes, that historical background, how it is moving. After organismic approach, you're going to explain that Galen has given this four humors and these are playing role how to identify a psychological problem or disorder, and it is related to those doshas, and we have studied about Charak Samhita, right? After that, next comes in the Middle Ages, demonology and superstition gained renewed importance in the explanation of abnormal behavior. This is what emphasizing in Middle Ages, what has been emphasized, what was the cause behind the abnormal behavior? The demonology and superstition. Again, that there are evil spirits, there is some natural, supernatural power, there are a lot of superstitions going in the society, and these were considered responsible for any kind of disorder, that there is some witch hunts during this period. Abhi bhi we all encounter, or we listen quite about these news in the newspaper ki, in some rural villages a particular woman has been tortured a lot because some witch was there on her head. So these are the reasons, these were the things which were considered of great importance during the Middle Ages. After that comes the Renaissance period. It was marked by increased humanism and curiosity about behavior. They insisted that witches were mentally disturbed and required medical, not theological treatment. Right? So a certain improvement has been done. इस period में क्या किया गया? It was emphasized that humanity should be emphasized. Curiosity about behavior was there, and you can remember John Ware emphasized psychological conflict and disturbed interpersonal relationships as causes of psychological disorders. Now they are not blaming the witch or some supernatural power behind any disorder, but what they are blaming, what is the cause? Some conflict might be there, some disturbed interpersonal relationship could be there behind any psychological disorder. Yes, in which period? In Renaissance period, right? After that comes the 17th and 18th centuries, which was also known as Age of Reason and Enlightenment. This we all can understand, as name is suggesting, that age of reason and enlightenment. Now this period emphasized the scientific method to understand the causes behind the abnormal behavior. The growth of a scientific attitude towards psychological disorders was found in the 18th century. Right? Another term you can see, deinstitutionalization. What does it mean? It means that which placed emphasis on providing community care for recovered mentally ill individuals. Suppose a mentally ill person is there and he has gone through some rehabilitation treatment, some rehabilitation center. Now he has again joined the normal society. So deinstitutionalization means that you just provide them some community care for recovering their mental illness. Just try to accommodate them as a part of the society. Different community centers should be there to help them, to treat them, to take the follow up, and still they can come up with the same symptoms. So just take notice of these people who have recovered from some mental illness earlier. In recent years, there has been a convergence of these approaches, which has resulted in an interactional or biopsychosocial approach. You can see there are many things in one word. There is a biological, there is a psychological, and there is a social approach. From this all three factors, that is biological factor, psychological factor, and social factor, play important roles in influencing the expression and outcome of psychological disorders. So in the same sequence, you're going to explain about the historical background. If a 6-mark question comes, and if particularly 2-mark or 3-mark question coming to specify a particular period, so you can write it about whether it is related to biological or psychological or organismic or middle age. Yes, so this is all about the historical background. Now comes the next heading, the next topic, classification of psychological disorders. So under this heading, I just make you underline certain things on which generally 1-mark question is there. They are saying that how do we classify different psychological disorders? Now, there must be some manual, there must be some book to consult that what kind of disorders are there, what are their symptoms, what could be the remedies, what are the basic causes. Yes, so American Psychiatric Association. Take out page number 73, first column, second paragraph of classification of psychological disorders. Start underlining the American Psychiatric Association, APA. Please remember the full form. It is a very important association. The American Psychiatric Association has published an official manual describing and classifying various kinds of psychological disorders. And what does it known as? What is the name of this? DSM-5. DSM means what? Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. And this is the 5th edition. Editions keeps on coming whenever there is a requirement or modify some things or introduce any kind of latest researches. So APA has published an official manual which is known as DSM-5. The full form of APA is American Psychiatric Association. The full form of DSM is Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, edition 5. Right? Another thing, the classification scheme officially used in India. Now, the scheme which is officially we are using in India and elsewhere also is the 10th revision of it is the 10th, start underlining this also. It is the 10th revision of the ICD-10. What is the full form? International Classification of Diseases. This we are using in India and elsewhere. This is the 10th edition, International Classification of Diseases, which is known as the ICD-10. Right? So it was prepared by the World Health Organization. Who has prepared this ICD-10? WHO. For each disorder, a description of the main clinical features or symptoms are there, different features are there, and guidelines are there, diagnostic guidelines that how to treat a particular disorder. It is all provided in these classifications or in these schemes. So basically two are there, DSM-5 given by APA, and the other one is ICD-10, which is used in India and elsewhere, and it has been created by WHO. So this is the classification of psychological disorders. OTQs are generally asked upon this topic, so just to give it a reading and underline the important names, right? Now we are coming on the next topic, factors underlying abnormal behavior. See, this chapter is very simple as we are reading. When we come over the disorders, that will another interesting part of the chapter, but whatever I'm explaining you right now, you all have done this earlier. Yes, the terms which we are using, we all have done it earlier. Now the thing which I'm going to start, that has been done by us quite a lot of time. What is it? Factors underlying abnormal behavior. Now they are saying that what are the factors, what are the different approaches of abnormal behavior. To start with the first one, it is biological factors. If I say that biological factors could be a factor or could be an approach to treat what? Abnormal behavior. So the biological factors, what it is saying, biological means it is related to biology of our body, the makeup of our body. So what are the factors? Maybe it could be faulty genes, maybe it could be endocrine imbalances, malnutrition, injuries, and other conditions which may interfere with normal development and functioning of the human body. So all these factors come under the biological approach. The faulty genes you are carrying from your parents, or some hormonal imbalances are there, you are not having your proper diet, you must be having some kind of injuries, maybe related to head, yes, and other conditions which are interfering with the normal development and functioning of the human body. So this is all about the biological model, or you can say the biological approach. Now under this same approach, if we just try to elaborate the things, we'll just explain the things, how does it move on. Biological researchers have found that psychological disorders are often related to problems in the transmission of message from one neuron to another. I hope you remember the third chapter, class 11. How does an information passes from one neuron to another? So they are trying to explain you that there must be some problems in the transmission of messages from one neuron to another. When an electrical impulse reaches a neuron's ending, the nerve ending is stimulated to release a chemical. What does it known as? Neurotransmitter. If someone asks you what does what you mean by a neurotransmitter, so what is it? When an electrical impulse reaches a neuron's ending, the nerve ending is stimulated to release a chemical. So neurotransmitter is a kind of chemical which is released by an electrical impulse. Fine. Studies indicate that abnormal activity by certain neurotransmitters can lead to specific psychological disorders. Now this is the main thing of this approach. They are saying that there must be some abnormal activity done by whom? By the neurotransmitters. And if it is there, a person is having some specific disorder. Now what it is related to, mainly what kind of disorders a person is having due to this faulty functioning of neurotransmitter. Anxiety disorders have been linked to low activity of GABA, G-A-B-A. Yes, anxiety disorders have been linked to GABA, which is known as GABA. Schizophrenia to excess activity of dopamine. Dopamine we all have read about it, this is a kind of hormone. So if dopamine is releasing in great amount, in large amount, schizophrenia might be there. It is a kind of disorder, major disorder. Depression, why does depression takes place in our body? It is also because of the low activity of serotonin. This is also a kind of hormone. Yes. So you can note down, you can underline these things because you can write it in your answer also. And if 1 mark question comes, then also it is very important. So dopamine की excess activity है तो schizophrenia हो सकता है. Low activity of serotonin is there, so depression could be there. Yes. An anxiety disorder has been linked to low activity of the neurotransmitter GABA. Fine. Now next comes genetic factors. First, we have studied about the biological factors. Now we are studying specifically the genetic factors. According to researchers, no specific genes are there. No single gene is responsible for a particular behavior or a psychological disorder. Many genes combine to help bring about various behaviors and emotional reactions, both functional also and dysfunctional. Getting the things? They are saying that not a single gene is responsible for any kind of function or a dysfunction in our body. If certain disorders are there, so there must be some combination of genes which are responsible for it. Although there is a sound evidence to believe that genetic or biochemical factors are involved in mental disorders, as diverse as, again, they are saying that if there are faulty genes, a combination of genes are there, faulty genes, so what kind of disorders could be there? Schizophrenia, depression, anxiety, etc. But biology alone cannot account for most mental disorders. This is a very important line, that alone biology, we cannot blame biology alone for having any kind of mental disorder. There are various other factors responsible for any kind of psychological disorder, right? So biological we have done, the genetic we have done, there must be overprotection also sometimes. There must be over permissiveness, faulty discipline activities are there. So these are what? Certain psychological factors. Faulty parent-child relationship could be there, maternal deprivation could be there, and maladaptive family structures. This is a very important factor which is responsible, that if there is any fault in family structure, whether it is inadequate or disturbed family due to any reason, so it will lead to psychological disorders among an individual. This was about psychological model. Now, this psychological model is also including the psychodynamic, the behavioral, cognitive, and humanistic existential models. Why I said in the beginning that we have done all these models earlier. When I say psychological model, all these models will come under this heading. What are those? To start with, first one is psychodynamic. Second one is behavioral. Third one is cognitive. And fourth one is humanistic existential models. If I say psychodynamic, we have done this model in very detail in chapter number 2, given by whom? Sigmund Freud. You all remember psychodynamic? Yes, in this you're going to explain the three forces, the three central forces of the personality, the id, the ego, and the superego. You'll also emphasize upon the unconscious part. You'll also describe the name of the psychologist Sigmund Freud. And please remember, psychodynamic model is the oldest and most famous of the modern psychological models. It is the oldest also and the most famous one. So under this psychodynamic model, you're going to explain about the id, ego, and superego, the internal forces, yes, unconsciousness, and how it is related to, early childhood or infancy. If certain conflicts are there during early childhood or infancy period, then a person is likely to develop any kind of disorder or mental illness later on in his or her life. Next comes behavioral model. In this model, you're going to explain about little bit about classical conditioning, about operant conditioning, and about social learning. This model is simply saying that we are learning any normal behavior or abnormal behavior because there are certain ways to learn it. Yes, learning is always there, whether we are learning the adaptive behavior or the non-adaptive behavior, whether we are learning the normal behavior or whether we are learning the abnormal behavior. So learning is always there. And you can explain a little bit that how classical conditioning operates, that when two events repeatedly occur close together in time. How operant conditioning behavior is followed by a reward. And how social learning is that we used to imitate, we used to follow, we used to observe others' behavior in the society, right? This we're going to explain under the behavioral model. Now comes upon the next cognitive model. It is related to what? The cognitive problems. Cognitive problems, if I say, to related to our thinking, to our mental processes. As an individual, we often hold very strong and very wrong beliefs about ourselves based upon certain situations. We used to have a very false belief of about ourselves that I'm not competent, I'm not confident, nobody likes me. So these are certain faulty beliefs. These are certain irrational beliefs which we are holding about ourselves based upon some situations. कुछ situations ऐसी हुई life में कि we have made this impression about ourselves. So overgeneralizations are there. Sometimes we overgeneralize the things. We take other things very in a very wrong manner. Yes, we hold very irrational, illogical beliefs. Suppose somebody does not help us, so we just make this impression that nobody helped me, nobody is interested in me, nobody loves me. Maybe there could be a reason why that person hasn't helped you that time. So we never try to give logic. So this cognitive model is saying that people are having negative thinking about themselves, and that's why they are developing certain kind of disorders. Next comes the humanistic existential model. In this, the same thing you're going to explain children about the positive tendencies, friendliness, cooperativeness, constructiveness, self-actualization, to strive for freedom, growth, all these things you're going to explain. One new thing you're going to explain, that existentialist as humanistic and existential model is there. So existentialists believe that from birth we have total freedom to give meaning to our existence. Yes, we have freedom to give meaning to our existence. The other thing, to avoid that responsibility. In one way, we are giving meaning to our existence. We have purpose in our life. And other thing could be, we don't have any purpose. We are just avoiding that responsibility. And if we are doing this, then what will we are facing? The emptiness, the inauthenticness, the dysfunctional lives. That means the problematic situations, the mental illness, various kinds of conflicts, various kinds of disorders. Yes. After this, next comes the socio-cultural model. In social cultural model, you're going to explain about how society and culture is affecting the behavior, the abnormal behavior, right? So you can just give a certain example, which is given on page number 75, second column. Lot of examples are given about families. Some families have an enmeshed structure. Enmeshed means very difficult, very hard situations are there. So in such type of families, what happen? Members are over involved in each other's activities. Lot of interference is there, you know. So children from this kind of family have difficulty in becoming independent in life. They cannot take decisions. They do not have that autonomy. So you can give example of this kind of family. Another kind of thing you can give, social networks in which people operate, include their social and professional relationships. Social and professional relationships come under social network. That how do you have your work relationship with people. Studies have shown that people who are isolated and lack social support, that is strong and fulfilling interpersonal relationships in their lives, are likely to become more depressed. Those people who are isolated, alone, yes, those who are not having positive interpersonal relationships, those who are not able to maintain good relations, so these people are likely to develop depression later on. Another thing what this approach is saying, that societal labels and roles are assigned to troubled people. Whenever we find some people with any kind of mental illness or any kind of deviation is there from normality, what label we used to give them? A label of craziness, the label of madness, the label of sick. So the person who is encountering, who is feeling, who is going through this phase, what he will gradually learns to accept this and play the sick role and functions in a disturbed manner. If we keep on saying a certain person that you are mad, you are crazy, you always behave abnormally, so what that person will gradually, slowly and slowly accept that blame and start behaving in the same manner, start playing the same sick role, same disturbed role. So this also you can write down under socio-cultural model. After this comes the last model, diathesis stress model. Page number 75, the last paragraph, diathesis stress model. Now this is a new model for all of you. So this model is consisting of 3 stages. What is diathesis means? It means a biological predisposition to the disorder. It means that we have something inside us, inside our body, that is related to biology, and we are more prone to certain kind of disorders related to psychological. Yes. So diathesis stress model consists of 3 steps. The first is diathesis, or the presence of some biological aberration which may be inherited. What does this mean? That there must be some biological reason which could be faulty one and which could be inherited. That means you are carrying it from your parents. It is inside your genes. That biological aberration means some conflict, some faultiness is there, and you are carrying it from your parents. That is inherited. This is the first step. The second step, the second component is what? The diathesis may carry a vulnerability to develop a psychological disorder. What does it mean? That if a person is having this biological aberration, what chances increases to develop a particular psychological disorder? That person is at risk stage. That person is more prone to a certain kind of psychological disorder just because of that faulty biological makeup, yes, which he or she has inherited. The third component is presence of pathogenic stressors, that is factors or stressors that may lead to psychopathology. We have done this term in chapter number 3 recently. Pathogens are what? These are the stressors. These are the factors which are there in the environment and which is responsible to develop any kind of psychopathology, means any disease, any abnormality related to psychological well-being of an individual. So this is all about various approaches, various models. We're going to start with the different kind of disorder from tomorrow. Ma'am, please